Thank you very much, Madam Chair. After Coretta, I'm not sure if I could keep you awake, actually. This evening, I'd like to speak on the topic education for a green economy, within the context, of course, of Guyana's thrust over successive administrations on looking at sustainable development. I want to thank the University of Guyana for the opportunity to speak and to acknowledge the previous speakers who have thoughtfully addressed education reform in the context of Guyana's socio-economic development, and to add that a truly sustainable future for Guyana requires equal attention to the three dimensions: economic, social, and environmental well-being. Speaking of education and our future, this is very much about building the human capital, which is the basis, as we've heard already, for any sustainable economy. In this presentation, I will propose 3 benchmarks that ought to form part of the foundational goals of a reformed education program geared towards building human capital. But before continuing, it is important to recognize that educational reform for a future economy presupposes that we have a common view on what are the current challenges and opportunities, and perhaps more importantly, that we have a common understanding of the future we want. I would like to associate my remarks with those of Mr. Chris Fernandes, who has distilled out some very clear steps to address the big challenges in our education system. Chris is at the pinnacle of his professional, in his profession. He's at the pinnacle within civil society, and he's within the pinnacle of the public sector in the sense that he has been the chairman of the board of one of our foremost secondary schools for 11 years. And so we should think of what he says very seriously. Friends, as we think of our future economy, there are 2 distinct choices that we can make. When we look at our current economy, it is and has always been commodity-driven, always exposed to external forces. Our brain drain has been unchecked, and the rate of out-migration of our most qualified has outstripped every other country on the planet. But on the flip side, our natural capital, our ecosystems, especially when measured against the size of our population, is among the highest, the most intact, and the most valuable in the world. And yes, there is the promise of oil revenues in 2020, from 2020, just 2 years from now. Our choice of future will be determined today, and I really do mean today, this year. Do we continue blithely along and accept a future in which we depend on commodities such as oil, over which we have so little control, an economy characterized by the so-called resource curse? And we've seen that with the collapsed sugar industry. We've seen that with the bauxite industry. We've seen that in the 70s, as Chris pointed out. Or do we create a future by building a solid human capital foundation, addressing our infrastructural needs and social inequities, while maintaining our truly world-class natural capital? Friends, exactly 2 weeks ago, and in this very room, one of the world's leading green economy specialists, Pavan Sukhdev, described an economy that, he says, results in improved human well-being and social equity, whilst significantly reducing environmental risks and ecological scarcities. That, my friends, describes a green economy, and one that we all would want. This is not an environmental issue, this is a development issue, and it is a necessary choice to secure a future, not for ourselves, but for all humanity. And so this green economic path, I propose, is the right turn at the crossroad where we find ourselves today. From my perspective, working with an organization that helps people care for nature, a green economy future for Guyana is only possible through an obsessive focus to turn our human capital from the deficit where it has been for decades into a net positive. From the skills we need through to the fundamental shift in human behavior, all will be required to achieve a green economy. And this is the future of not only ourselves, of humanity as a whole. But this, friends, requires education reform, and deeply so. Not education reform in small font size, but big and bold and with obsession. We are in a state of emergency in this matter. In 2015, the Registrar of CXC, Dr. Didacus Jules, called for a paradigm shift in education where he says, content will give way to competence. Analytical skills will supersede memorization, and interdisciplinarity will reinforce key competencies. He stated that our educational systems in the Caribbean are no longer working, and we simply cannot continue to tinker with the system. Friends, that was 2015, and we have continued to tinker. Our current education system has failed to help Guyana deliver the human capital that we require. One may argue that it trains people for the market abroad. It alienates us from our land, our resources, our natural and our cultural patrimony. A big part of the issues relates, I believe, to the metrics we use to measure performance. We say that we cannot measure we cannot manage what we do not measure, but oftentimes I believe we only manage what we measure. And so we manage through the simple indicators such as percentage passes, number of schools built, number of teachers graduated, number of CXC subjects our children write. The inventory list in the supply chain of human capital improvement delivery is truly long. But what if we measure against impact? I would like to propose these 3 benchmarks for your consideration, and I believe these should form part of the foundational goals of a reformed education program. Firstly, we must see a reduction and ultimately a reversal in the net out-migration of tertiary trained graduates and school leavers. We cannot begin to think of building a critical mass to move our development forward without training Guyanese for Guyana. Secondly, and related to this, we must increase the relevance of education for our regions and communities. We are increasingly South American, even as we honor our Caribbean history. We cannot hope to build pride in our people all around Guyana if the education and training they receive alienates them from their family's culture and their community's way of life. And thirdly, we must reduce the amount of retraining that employers must undertake before their newer employees can become productive. This affects the balance sheets of our private sector and speaks to the relevance and effectiveness of our educational system to the needs of our society. Colleagues, Guyana can be a world-class destination of excellence in the green economy, but we cannot and will not achieve this without an obsessive focus on education reform today, now, and long before 2020 starts. A dream? Perhaps, unless we have the guts and the spirit to take a non-partisan, state of emergency approach to the issue, where we pitch our minds to foundational goals and real impact. For most Guyanese, the majority of Guyanese, your lifetimes are ahead of you. For some, your lifetimes have already been etched in the sands of time. And for some, this is our lifetime. We have a chance that will not come again for the foreseeable future, by which we can do something that can take us out of the barren barrel called potential and to the reality and the future that we all want and deserve. Let us act now.